Hello and welcome to the next Xcam tutorial video, and in this part I want to show you one more example about the user-defined rotation axis, and then we go on with the slope function. So here we go. First I have to load the same project as in the last video tutorial, so this one, and now I will show you another example about the user-defined rotation axis. And the object we want to use for this example is a sidewalk object. And this object type has not a good bounding box, as you can see here. And you know, if you copy this object along the bounding box, then you get really large gaps between each object. And now we want to change this. And now that's okay. And as I said before, you can only use a user-defined rotation axis if you work with a stepwise or the 45 degrees rotation. And by default, the stepwise rotation uses 5 degree steps, and that's sometimes a little bit too much rotation for each step. And if I try this stepwise rotation now, then you can see what I mean. And for this reason I will change this setting now. So switch to the settings layer, select the Xcam settings, and here at the first point you will find the small rotate steps. And as I said, the default value is 5 degrees, and now I change this setting to the smallest possible value, and that's 1 degrees. And now if you want, you can use this new value immediately now. But if you want to use it with every Xcam session, then you can save the new value as a new default setting. Okay, switch back to the objects layer, then select the latest saved object, and now you can see the stepwise rotation is now much smoother, much finer. Maybe one important thing at this point is if you use a user-defined rotation axis, then it makes sense to copy the objects only in one direction, in this direction, to use stepwise rotation correctly. Because if you switch to the other direction, to this one, and you copy the objects now, then you know that's not the right way to copy the objects if you use this user-defined rotation axis. And now we are able to create a sidewalk exactly along this road. And now we can use this object, and this object has already user-defined data. So It's only an example, you know. I think it looks really good. Okay, and now we take a little trip to Altis, and here I will show you some more functions in connection to the copy function. So here we go. And before we start, I want to say some words about the status line here down below. And we start with the objects counter here on the left side, and this counter shows you how many objects you have saved within your active project. So the next one is frames per second, and this one, DTIST, that means detection distance, is a very important value, but I want to talk about this value later. So we go on with the next one, and that's current used view distance. And the next two values are the pos-x, pos-y from the center of the crosshair. And the next value is the ASL high, and that means the ASL high below the mouse cursor. So if you move your mouse, then you can see the different values about ASL. And the last one shows you the cursor distance. That means the distance between the cursor and the crosshair. If I move my mouse pointer exactly to the center of the crosshair, then you see the distance is 0. But if I move my mouse pointer away, then you see the distance between, between the center and the mouse cursor. Also sometimes useful. Okay, now we can go on with the next function, and that's the slope function. And slope means how the objects react on slope on terrain. And you have to know that this behavior is always a property of the respective object. And no matter if you place objects with or without this function, if you later import the objects into a terrain builder project, then the objects are always behave according to their property. And of course, you are not able to change this property with the XCAM. And in connection to this difference between Arma 3 and the terrain builder, there are basically only two reasons to use this function with the XCAM. And the first reason is if you want to export your project as a script file or maybe as a mission file, because then this object property plays no role anymore, and the objects are placed exactly as they were created with XCAM. And the second reason is if you exactly knows how an object reacts after the import into a terrain builder project, then you can use this function a little bit as a help function. And this is what I want to show you now. So for example, if I want to create a sidewalk here along the road, and I want to use this sidewalk object, then I exactly know that this object has a property to react on slope on terrain after the object was imported into a terrain builder project. And first I will create some objects without this slope function, And in the second step, I turn the slope function on, and then you can see the difference, and maybe you can better understand in which situations you can use this slope function. Okay, now I will start to create some objects along the road, but without the slope function. And as you can see, for this object, an user-defined bounding box is already saved. So I can start with a copy action. And as you can see, it's a little bit hard to see if all the objects have the correct position, because all the objects are aligned vertically. Okay, and now the same procedure, but I will turn the slope function on. And first I have to delete the latest objects. Select this object, and to turn the slope function on, simply press this button, SLO. And if you press this button, then you will see a small marker, and that shows you which placement mode is currently active. So, and you can press the button again to turn the slope function off again. Okay, and now the second try, but now the slope function is active, and that's easy. And as you can see now, it not only looks much better, but you can really see if all the objects are placed on the correct position. By default, the slope function is turned off. And that means if you select any object type here from the library list to create a temporary object, and if you want to use the slope function now, then you have to turn the slope function on first. But if you select an already saved object, for example this one, and the slope function was saved for this object, then the slope function is automatically turned on, and you can go on with the action, with the copy action. So that's easy. If you now select the whole object group, so by pressing G, and you move the objects, then you can see that the slope functionality is still active for each object. And if you want to disable the slope function for each object, press E, then simply press the slope button again, and then you can see all the objects has now no slope functionality. Press the button again, and slope is again active. If you copy the whole object group, then of course the new object group behaves like the original object group. So the slope functionality is turned on for each object within the new object group. It's also possible to switch the slope function on and off by pressing a key, and that's really useful if you work with a single brush, for example. So first start the single brush by pressing B, and now if you copy some objects, that's the result if you work with a normal mode. But now if you turn the slope function on by pressing the key I, then you see the objects now react on slope on terrain. Press I again to switch back to the normal mode.